Uchasanel, brothers and sisters, and welcome to the Ra'ama Hetepa Men podcast show powered by the Maā Sa Society. In this podcast, we'll explore basic principles of the Maā Sa Philosophy, consciousness, culture, and the restoration of your spiritual authority in your everyday life. Today's conversation we want to touch on is the conversation of transcending racism through the Maā Sa Philosophy. Now notice, we didn't say enduring racism. We didn't say we're going to talk about the situations that happen to us as a result of racism. No, we said transcending racism. So before you turn your iPad off, before you turn your cell phone off, I want you to listen to this one thing. Racism has become an industry here in America. There is so much money, identity, and attention being put to it that its circulation and perpetuation is more valuable than it ending. In our society today, you have people that are profiting off the conversation of racism. And of course, you've had people for many years benefiting from the social system built upon systemic racism. And even today, we have people utilizing racism for positioning and influence. So it's no longer about enduring racism. It's simply about intentionally keeping the conversation going for the benefit of the few. Now, as we go down this road, here's what happens. As we continue to fight against this perpetual racism, we never reach the stage of empowerment within our society. So in other words, the very empowerment that you gain from enduring and overcoming, we never get to that stage because we're stuck in this perpetual loop of fighting racism. And therefore, we never get to the level of empowerment that we need to get to increase the profitability and prosperity of our communities. In the fight against racism, we have to come to accept fundamental notions about ourselves. We have to come to accept ideas about ourselves that actually put us in conflict to the concepts of our true nature, natural, spiritual being. In other words, the concepts that we have to accept through fighting racism contradict the nature of our spiritual self, the very entity within us that is the source of our empowerment and miraculous events within our lives. So we're brought to this conversation. We're brought to this question. Do we continue to function within this matrix, right? Because racism can only exist within this matrix. It doesn't exist anywhere else. Racism is not a natural thing to Ma'at or the universe. It's not something that's built. Racism only exists in the human sphere. It doesn't exist in the animal kingdom. It doesn't exist in the insect kingdom. It doesn't exist in astrology. It only exists in the human kingdom. It's not something that's wired within the universe. So therefore, it's no reality. It can only exist within the matrix. And since this matrix is built upon dependence and servitude, we have to ask ourselves this fundamental question. You see, it's my job just to start the conversation. I'm not trying to put you off. I'm not trying to say that you didn't endure racism. I'm not trying to say that undermine or the atrocities that people have experienced through racism. No, I said transcend racism. It's a conversation that I want to have with you just to spark a strategy to make sure that we're moving in a direction that's truly supportive of our future well-being and prosperity. But we have to ask ourselves this fundamental question. Do we continue fighting racism, which means that we're functioning within this matrix, and which means we're still fighting for dependence and servitude? Or do we do essentially what the Maā Sa Philosophy is asking us to do, which is create a new paradigm, a new matrix built upon benevolence, order, and total well-being? You see, the concept of this old system, the system from which you're fighting, and the old matrix is built upon dependence and servitude. The fundamental principle of that system is for you to be dependent upon external management. So therefore, this system is built upon policing, the medical industry, social, economical things, all things done outside of you. And its job is to create dependence within you for these things. But see, the Maā Sa Society, the Maā Sa Philosophy is wants to introduce a new paradigm. You see, instead of pushing dependence and servitude, the Maā Sa philosophy wants to push understanding and awareness. You see, when your understanding and awareness grows, there is no need for you to be externally managed. So in this concept, as your understanding and awareness goes, you're able to take governorship over your life, control over your outcomes. You shift from the needs to be externally managed to internal awareness through Ma'at. And that is essentially what the Maā Sa philosophy is here to do. Now, racism at its core, and listen, I want you to really think about what we're about to say. Racism at its core is built upon dependence. It's built upon inoculating within you a sense that you need external mechanisms for your life success. That's fundamentally the foundation and goal of racism. As a matter of fact, it puts you at a severe risk when you are dependent upon things outside of you for your well-being. You are now putting yourself at risk towards the people that are controlling these external mechanisms that you depend upon. Their sentiment, their goals, their desires may completely be against your sentiment, your goals, and your needs. And that's fundamentally what racism does. When you are externally managed, you're at the mercy of the people who rule these systems from which you are dependent upon. And if their goals and dreams are not in alignment to you, then you are going to be met with the atrocities of racism that we have experienced and that our ancestors have experienced for many years. And so if we stay in that perpetual need to be managed outside of us, we're always going to be in a position by which whoever is managing us is going to make decisions not in our best interests. Now, you may have been raised to think that racism is something that is only a perpetuation of white people, but that's not true. As a matter of fact, I used to be a computer programmer, managing information system guy when I first got out of college. And of course, you know, those industries are heavily inundated with people from India and Nigeria. And so a lot of my Nigerian acquaintances that I had in there swore up and down that there was something worse than racism of America. And that was tribalism. So in other words, you have everybody in the country that's all of the quote unquote same skin color, but they function within different tribes. When one tribe goes to power, all the other positions are given to that tribe, and therefore the desires of that particular tribe are made a priority over the desires of the other people who exist in other tribes. And they swear up and down that it's worse. So if we were to remove white people out of America, but still kept the need for external management, then we would find ourselves in a tribal system and still dealing with the same atrocities that you have experienced through the white chattel slavery and racism that you have experienced here in America. That's something that you got to understand. You see, I'm saying this because the Maā Sa teaches us that source manifests through the limitations of the mind as man and woman. It doesn't say source manifests through the limitations of the mind as black man and black woman. No, all beings are expression of the one thing. We call that concept Eri, that all beings are an expression of the one thing. There's only one experience manifesting through all diverse beings. So this is not about devaluing white people or making them look evil or whatever. This is just creating a fundamental understanding and awareness of racism. Racism boils down to being externally managed. So if you are dependent upon, if your religious system is teaching you to be dependent upon something outside of you, if your social economical system is teaching you to be dependent upon something outside of you, if your, family system, your development and rearing of children is teaching you to be dependent upon something outside of you, then you are going to experience racism. I don't care who the people are that's running the system. That system that is built upon you being dependent is putting you at risk for the atrocities we have experienced through racism no matter who's controlling those systems. So the Maā Sa is here to help us gain understanding and awareness and eliminate the need to be externally managed. That is the purpose of the Maā Sa society. And that is the only way you can truly transcend slavery. Transcend racism. It's to detach yourself from the dependence of the systems built upon racism. Dr. Clyde Anderson, one of the greatest, philosophical, economic person, if you will, said that racism is a race. It's a competition for resources. And through the competition for resources, if you can render the people that own the resources, if you can render them dependent upon your system, then that is a phenomenal way for you to siphon the resources from people that have to the people that don't have and create wealth and prosperity within. And the people that now have prosperity and wealth must create a system that perpetually keeps you in dependence so you can continue to serve the needs of the quote unquote oligarchical people that run that system. That is fundamentally what racism is. If anybody else is trying to tell you racism is anything other than that, they either lack knowledge or they're lying. So the Maā Sa society is teaching us that, right, it returns us to self-governance through understanding. It restores your alignment with Ma'at, where your life is no longer dictated by external control, but guided by internal clarity and awareness. The goal is to increase the understanding of the people. And through the understanding, you create a collective understanding by which when we experience things, we all see it the same way. And therefore, that eliminates the need to be externally managed. That is essentially one of the major reasons how you can overcome and transcend racism. Because I think we spend too much time, unfortunately, talking about the atrocities that you have endured through racism. So during Black History Month, all we do is inundate each other with stories of the past. And we even continue to rehearse stories from hundreds of years ago. And we stay in that space versus empowering ourselves to overcome these things so we can experience the blessings that come from empowering ourselves and move forward with a new commitment, a new society that actually benefits us. But anyway, I digress. Let's keep it moving here. So our ancestors that experienced the atrocities of slavery, the Jim Crow era, I don't think it's completely out of bounds for me to say that what they endured is nowhere close to what we're enduring right now. As a matter of fact, I would say that what we're enduring right now, quote unquote racism, because I'm not saying racism doesn't exist. I'm saying that racism, in my opinion, is a minor part of society right now. But if you compare it to what our ancestors endured, then it's just a flicker. But it's the main topic. So our ancestors had to endure racism. They were never given the opportunity to transcend racism. But we exist in the era where we have the opportunity to transcend racism. If an ancestor came from the slavery days and, got in a time machine and teleported to our current age right now, I always wonder, would they be proud of where we are right now? Or would they be somewhat proud? Or would they be completely taken back that we haven't gone further? Would they see some of the situations that we call racism and laugh at us and say to us, you're calling that racism? Or is that what's holding you back? And then I always think about what would be the expectations? What would be their expectations placed upon us? Where should we be at this moment? Now, I want you to listen to these stats, because the reason why I'm saying that is because of these stats. Now, mind you, these are the stats I pulled, through research. And if you disagree, feel free to hit me up in the chat. Feel free to shoot us through an email. That's info@maasa.org, MAA-SA.org. But there are approximately 500 to 600,000 black people incarcerated in the United States, in the American prison industrial complex. There are roughly about 500,000 to 600,000 people incarcerated. That's a shocking number. I want to be clear. And we do have to do something about that. No question about it. I was shocked at how that compares to other ethnicities. The white community, Hispanic community. Yeah, and I was shocked at how we almost double. I think the next race, which I think is the Hispanic community, we actually almost double them, which is something that we definitely need to take a look into. But anyway, I also did a stat on how many black millionaires exist within America as of right now. So that means households that have an income of $1 million or individuals who reached the millionaire status. So how many millionaires do we have in America? We have approximately 1.8 millionaires, black millionaires in America. Now, again, if you compare those to other races, we are not as high as other people. However, 1.8 million black people is truly a powerful thing to say. Even though we have much more work to prove upon that number, I still think it's a phenomenal number. So we have 1.8 million black millionaires in America, and approximately 500,000 black people incarcerated. Now, if you do the math, that means for every black person incarcerated, there is 3 black millionaires. So the ratio of black millionaires to incarcerated people are 3 to 1. Now, why am I saying that? Because if an ancestor came into this space right now from the slavery days and saw how well we were doing, I think their expectations of us will be greatly increased. And I think that they wouldn't feel good about where we are with that type of success. That we spend more time talking about the narrative of the prison industrial complex versus the narrative of the success that we are experiencing right now. I wonder if there's a interest, a scheme, a system built upon keeping us away from understanding and knowing those stats. In the political sphere, if you listen to the political right doing politics time, right, and they're trying to get votes, and they're trying to speak to black people about what they're going to do for black people so that influence us to vote for them. And they typically will focus their attention upon the prison systems, increasing CPS value, making the classroom more better. All these things are representing what? External control, external management. The prison system is externally managing. No, if families took care of their people, there would be no need for prisons. So when they get in front of you as politicians and talk about all the things they're going to do to increase funding to public school, to increase funding to help people to get away from committing crime and things of that nature, what they're selling to you is that we're going to do everything outside of you. They don't tell you how you can truly end that number, which is what? Getting people to commit to each other within families and things of that nature. But it's dominated. The 500, right? That small collective group of people dominates the interest. When our politicians should be talking about how they can do things to improve the quality of the millionaires so that the millionaires can come together and influence better change within the community. Every other community is self-sufficient. The white community is self-sufficient. They do their own thing. The Chinese community, self-sufficient. Even the Hispanic community is self-sufficient. Right? But the Jewish community, we're the only community that is not self-sufficient, even though we have 1.8 million black billionaires. Why are we not efficient and empowering ourselves. It's because we're stuck in the narrative of fighting racism. Where I'm saying that we're beyond the narrative of fighting racism. Now we're in the narrative of what? Empowerment and building things, framing things so that we can truly benefit from them. If you look at that same 500,000 people that are incarcerated in America right now, it's approximately 52 million blacks, so they say, and I don't buy into the census data, but let's use that number. 52 million black people in America, 500,000 incarcerated. That represents only 1% of the black population. Only 1% of the black population are enduring those limitations. But yet, during political times, that 1% becomes the major piece of conversation, become the major piece of racism, police brutality, and these things of nature that we're quote unquote fighting, but we're not fighting to organize and consolidate the 1.8 to build infrastructure that can truly allow us to transcend racism. And so that's the conversation. You can dislike me having this conversation. You can disagree with some of these conversations. But guess what? We have to have the conversation. We have to critique what's going on with us right now. And let's have this conversation. Let's critique this conversation so we can move on. But remember, there are people out there that are profiting from the conversation of racism. There are people out there profiting from the systemic racism. There are people out there influencing and position themselves through racism. That doesn't mean that they're taking care of you. The only way you're going to survive in this world is taking care of self. And the way we take care of self, according to the Maā Sa Society, is we increase our understanding and awareness and eliminate the need to be externally managed. That's the only way you're going to be able to rise above this system. So what we have to re-engage is here's my contention. We are being tethered to that matrix that's built to keep you in dependence and servitude. We're being tethered to that matrix through the system that wants us to stay within the matrix. So therefore, the systems that are being put in place by which both expressions of white supremacy benefit wants to keep the conversation going. And therefore, we are tethered to the system, not understanding that there's a greater pot of gold at the other end of the rainbow. And that's what we need to understand. The Maā Sa teaches us that you are the source manifesting through the limitations of the mind itself. So why would you experience something like slavery? Why would you experience something like rape? Why would you experience quote unquote unfortunate events? If you are the source manifesting through the limitations of the mind, and source brought the universe into manifestation, we didn't say create, we said brought into manifestation. If source brought the universe into manifestation, then what's the purpose of source enduring itself to slavery and all the other atrocities, enduring itself to the obstruction in your life, the so-called unfortunate events that we all experience in life? What is the purpose? There's only one purpose. The purpose is to endure, transcend, and stand in empowerment. That is the thing that makes us divine. That is the thing that makes us the source manifesting through the limitations of the mind itself, is that we experience atrocities, we experience slavery, we experience unfortunate events, we endure those things, learn from those things, transcend those things, and stand in empowerment. That's what those situations give us the opportunity to do. The atrocities of slavery gives us the opportunity to stand in empowerment, to stand in greatness, to stand in success and say, look at what I endured, look at what I overcame. That is the tremendous opportunity that unfortunate events provides you. I don't care what it is. If you think of it any other way, then you cannot conclude that source is intelligence. Because in our system, once Ma'at came into manifestation, source transcended itself into the system that it manifested and finds its highest expression through man and woman. So why would it put itself in a perpetual loop to be led, to be dependent upon beings that don't have its best interests in mind, that seek to diminish it within this space. We couldn't consider that situation. We couldn't consider that entity intelligent. So the reason why we endure those things is simply to endure, transcend, and stand in empowerment. Utilize that empowerment to establish greatness so that our ancestors that come in the future can look back and say, look at the greatness of our people. They are teaching us through example how great we are. Why do you think the pyramids were actually built? Do you honestly think that the pyramids in Giza were actually built to bury one dude? Is that the story that your white enslavers is providing you? No, your ancestors wanted to leave you with an image of how great your society could be, your capacity. They knew that you were going to be enslaved and put through this wretched state, and they wanted you to see through your own eyes what true greatness is and the capacity that you have to overcome any and all things to achieve your greatness. That's why the pyramids exist. But white people tell you the pyramids exist to bury one dude. That is complete preposterous, if you will. If you stop at endurance, you stay in the cycle. If you transcend, you move into power. That is the only logical thing. The source would put itself through that situation. Why? Because it wanted to endure, transcend, and stand in empowerment. We, black people here in America, we have our pyramid that we have to build. But in order for us to get to our pyramid, we have to do what? Endure and transcend, and then build our pyramid so that those that come can see our greatness. And therefore, we must spend more time talking about our achievements versus other things. If nobody wants to come to you and talk about your achievements, then I suggest you find another person to talk with. You know, all my white friends that, consider themselves non-racist, so to speak, or whatever, I ask them, I say, what has black people done prior to America that benefits society? And 99% of them can't answer that question with any answer. So that tells you right there where they are. If they don't respect the fact that throughout the last 20,000 years, you have served a pivotal role to humanity. So I don't care which side you're on, if they can't communicate to you in that way, they have no respect for you. And therefore, a person that has no respect for you, you should diminish your need for their assistance. That is essentially what the Maā Sa Philosophy is here to do. So I wanted to close on the Eri Ma'a affirmation. Within the Maā Sa Society, this affirmation is one of our foundational affirmations. In the Maā Sa Society, we don't pray, because in order for us to pray, that acknowledges that there's something outside of us that's taking care of us. And now, of course, that puts us in a position of dependence again. We affirm, and affirmation means that we simply are affirming the reality within ourselves. And so the reality within ourselves, as we are the source manifesting through the limitations of the mind, so we do affirmations versus prayer. So the Eri Ma'a affirmation goes like this. I am the source manifesting through the limitations of the mind itself. I cannot be added to nor subtracted from. I cannot be diminished nor destroyed. I cannot be prevented nor obstructed in any way. I am the all-merciful light of love with the power to redeem, restore, and rise above sin and its consequences. All right, so I want to go into each verse of that, because that's such a powerful verse. In the Maā Sa Society, we recommend to our members that they recite that affirmation at least 5 times a day, because the Eri Ma'a affirmation is simply to recenter us in a self-identity that doesn't need to be managed externally. It centers us in a self-identity of empowerment. And that's why we're asked. We don't tell, we don't require. We ask you to do that affirmation at least 5 times a day. All right, so the first part, it says, I am the source manifesting through the limitations of the mind itself. So you have been trained to think that you are limited. You are a limited being reacting to more powerful forces. Can you imagine the source transitioning itself into Ma'at and experience through man and woman, that it would put itself in a position by which it is dependent upon other beings of ignorance or the ignorance of other people? Can you imagine it putting itself in a system by which its complete dependence, its complete success is based upon the ignorance of someone else, the ability of this other person to rise above ignorance? You know, when I go get my hair cut, and as you know, in the barbershops, you have great conversations. In the salons, you have great conversations. And I sit back quietly and just listen to people talk, and they talk about how powerful the white man is. It's impossible for you to win over the white man because he has all the knowledge, all the information, all the tools, all the weapons, and all these different things. And that's a fundamental violation of your true nature, that you affirm that, because source would never put itself in a position by which it could not endure, transcend, and stand in empowerment. It would never put itself in that position. That doesn't give it that opportunity. But when we affirm how evil the white society are, this power system, right? How powerful this system is, and we cannot win against it. Therefore, the only way we can truly win is to get into this perpetual fight against racism. Then that violates the fundamental principle of our being, which is what? We are the source manifesting through the limitations of the mind. The germ that brought the universe or Ma'at into manifestation, I am that entity simply functioning through the limitations of the mind. Therefore, there is no situation that I can endure where somebody in my life is more powerful than I. As a matter of fact, the only entity powerful enough to obstruct you is you. Now, if I'm able to get you to commit to enslaving yourself by rendering you dependent upon me, then that's your fault. Now you're doing the mental enslavement, but it's no reality that something outside of you has the capabilities to overcome, to supersede the power that you have within your spirit. That's why a major piece of slavery, the physical slavery, is to re-engineer your thinking. It's to replace the indigenous thinking with a new way of thinking that supports you being managed externally. That's why that system exists. The second part here says, I cannot be added to nor subtracted from. Racism teaches diminishment, that life can reduce you, that your experiences can reduce who you are. No, you are the experiencer. You are simply experiencing things. I don't care what you experience, the atrocities of slavery, rape, winning a lot of money, losing a lot of money, happy marriage, unhappy marriage. Whatever you experience, that's simply an experience from which the experiencer is simply traveling through. But the experiencer cannot be added to nor subtracted from. Who you identify with, who you should identify with, cannot be added to nor subtracted from. We're just enduring experiences as we move towards greater experiences. The third part of this, it says, I cannot be prevented nor obstructed in any way. Racism teaches you that someone outside of you can ultimately block your success, your well-being, your future. Just imagine if people thought that somebody outside of them can truly obstruct them. That will result in a lot of violence, a lot of anger towards each other, wouldn't that? But guess what? That's simply a fallacy that creates violence and anger and creates more populations in prison. Circumstances may challenge you, but they do not define your capacity. We're simply experiencing things simply to endure, transcend, and stand in empowerment. If you want to be powerful, if you want to be stronger, you got to lift weights. If you want to be more powerful, you got to endure and transcend and stand in empowerment. In order for you to get to your empowerment, you got to endure. So experience is just something that we're experiencing, but the nature of obstruction is something we deal with, and we overcome that obstruction to stand in empowerment. That is the reason why that exists. So it says, I cannot be prevented nor obstructed in any way. You know, if my destiny is to get to point B, there's nothing in this world that can stop me other than myself. Now, you can convince me to stop myself, And that's fine. But the reality is I can only stop myself. It says I have the power to redeem, restore, and rise above sin and its consequences. Racism teaches subservience, dependence, and limitation. That's how racism works. That's how you're kept in a manageable form, dependence and servitude. That's how you are kept in a position by which you need these external things to manage you. You need a police force dominated by those who don't have your best interests in mind. You need a medical industry dominated by those who don't have your best interests in mind. You need a social economical system dominated by those who don't have your best interests in mind. But see, you can rise above all that. You have the ability to build your pyramid. It says the Maā Sa teaches that your nature is to endure, overcome, and transcend. You have the ability to build your own pyramid. What's our pyramid that we're going to leave here in America, metaphysically and both physically? We can't get access to that level of empowerment unless we acknowledge that we have endured racism, transcend it, and stand in empowerment. So this is who you are, and this is why we ask our members to recite this affirmation at least 5 times a day, because it's a powerful thing. It can be applied to anything in your life. As we look into building ourselves into the self-identity that will truly bring us power and success. Imagine if the majority of us built ourselves upon this identity, and what type of power would we experience here in the world? That's something that to behold, and I know it's coming because I can feel the shift. We are currently in the age of Aquarius, and I'm dedicating a whole podcast to the age of Aquarius, what that means. The Generation Z and the younger millennials, they're the age of Aquarius kids. And we're going to talk about the great opportunities they have if they'll simply stand in empowerment versus going through the cycle of perpetuating the system by which now racism is making people money. It's a quote unquote $1 billion industry now. And so we have to be very careful about where we're going. So I'm not having this conversation to undermine or to demean your experiences with racism, to undermine the atrocities went through slavery and Jim Crow era. I'm simply here to state the reality that if we are the source manifesting through the limitations of the mind itself, then we have to move on to greater experiences because we have complete ownership of that. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is by increasing our understanding and awareness, and thus eliminate the need to be externally managed so that we can move forward in our true greatness and prosperity. So I want you to look at this conversation as a critique on how we're moving. And I want you to sit back and think about what was said today. And if you disagree, feel free to reach out to us. Feel free to comment. Feel free to invite me to a conversation, because we have to have this conversation. We have to critique where we are and where we're going. Also, please go to our website, themaasa.org, and look at some of our events that we have coming up. And also you can get greater detail about some of the things that the Maā Sa stands for. Also, feel free to download the app so you can get access to our live broadcast and our Sunday service that we do every Sunday. And I hope that you will increase your understanding, increase your awareness, and step away from being dependent upon the people that don't have your best interests in mind. Ucha Seneb, Sa Maā.